We are in studio with our good friend Scott Drucker, who is the CEO of AAR. And some of you are like, what the heck's AAR? That's the Arizona Association of Realtors. Some of you are like, what's the Arizona Association of Realtors? Well, that might be where we start. So Scott and I, we just had breakfast, so I'm embarrassed to say that we both ordered the yogurt parfaits. So
because we're so healthy, the two of us.
Yeah.
We're proud of you, Mikey.
Wow. That was an epoch moment right there.
And then I started eating bananas and strawberries, and my body started going into convulsions. My body's like, get that crap out. So Scott, thanks for taking the time for being with us. We've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of years with everything that's gone on with the National Association of Realtors and the settlements. We don't need to get into that. I think we beat that thing to death. We do have our new reality. I want to just start with, what is the Arizona Association of Realtors? What is it that we as agents truly don't understand as far as the value that you bring? Because I think a typical agent, when you ask them, what does AAR do for you? I think what you're going to mostly get is they provide us with forms in our contracts, which is incredibly important. And then Nick gets excited about the technology hotline so that he can call AAR and get his fax machine fixed.
I like that. Thank you.
He's always plugging that every single month on the orientation. But let's talk about AAR and your value proposition. What is it that we need to understand as far as the value that you bring to us as agents?
So we're a voluntary trade association, right? You go get your real estate license, and then you have a decision to make. Do you want to become a realtor? There's no obligation to do so. Our hope is at the state association, we charge $175 a year. That's what the dues are. I think we're the only state association in the country in the last 5 years that's actually lowered our dues. But the hope is, and our intent is, to offer members benefits and services so they turn around and go, you know what? That's worth $175 a year. That helps me be a professional. That helps protect my interests. That helps me better serve my clients. And that's what our goal is. And yes, forms are probably the most well-known benefit. There are others, and I'm sure we'll talk about them, but the forms are an important one. They really set the standard. They've been proven over time. There's lots of strong case law out there that upholds critical provisions within our purchase contracts. They're fair to buyers, they're fair to sellers, but there's also things in there that protect you as the realtor, which is critical.
Like what? Like what protects me?
Yeah, look, first of all, having a balanced contract is in and of itself a benefit to the realtor, right? Because you don't just represent buyers, you don't just represent sellers. There's also certain disclaimers in there. There's disclosures that, hey, your agent is not an expert in ABC, right? Your agent may not be an expert in solar. Your agent is not an expert in, roof defects, right? You're disclaiming certain claims that you may otherwise have. So those are the sorts of things that I think are presented within the purchase contract that, again, looks out for your interest. And these contracts aren't written in stone. And so we're always improving them. We're always listening to practitioners, hearing what they have to say, and making changes. And if there are things that are proving problematic for members, we'll change it.
So let's jump into that. Let's jump into forms. Some of the biggest news that's out there is we are eliminating the CAB form from Transaction Desk and from being used as far as the Arizona Association of Realtors. What is and what was the CAB form?
Sure.
And why, or what was the process in basically making it go bye-bye?
Yeah, so the CAB is the compensation agreement between brokers, and it went away on February 1st. So today is really our first day of, doing business without the CAB. And the CAB allowed brokerages to pre-negotiate compensation. And as a result, it was a system that was somewhat similar to the system that we had before, right? While making it clear to both parties that compensation is negotiable. What we found in regard to AAR forms is the market often dictates which forms are used and which aren't, right? And while I think that the compensation agreement between brokers was important from the standpoint of easing the transition to our new reality, over time, it's proven that the seller compensation addendum is the stronger of the two forms and the one that practitioners are choosing to utilize. And so because of that, we're able to phase out the compensation agreement between brokers and have everybody uniformly use the seller compensation addendum. And while I think that maybe 6 months ago that would have been a big deal, right now, again, I think the seller compensation addendum is being used in the vast majority of transactions, and so I just don't think it's going to be much of a create waves. I mean, you guys see the transactions, you can tell me, but I don't think that the removal of the cab is. We're not hearing a lot of uproar.
I've never used it. I've never had a need to use it. I think the seller commission addendum is a great form in obviously. In relation to using the buyer broker agreement, it works. So like for us, we've never had to use the cab form,
and it certainly best reflects the fact that sellers are making informed decisions as to are they offering compensation to the buyer's agent, and if so, how much.
Well, here's my problem with the cab form. If I'm using the cab form and you and I are going back and forth and negotiating my compensation, during that process, a lot of bad stuff can happen in the sense another offer comes through and your seller goes, I'll take that offer. And while I'm sitting there negotiating the cab form, my buyer's out. So that was kind of my problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, even from a negotiation perspective, I think there was an angle for an argument that you'd never tell the buyer what you're willing to do. It's kind of like for instance, once you've made an established compensation amount from the seller potentially to the buyer's agent. Do you think the buyer's agent's going to come off that number? Do you think the buyer's agent's not going to negotiate that number? Is not going to make it part of it? No. So, I mean, it's possible that a buyer could have come along and not needed that compensation assistance, and the seller could have potentially walked away with more money. So I think the way that it organically, Scott, to your point, through the transition of the cab, I think it made total sense where now most of us realize that the seller compensation agreement is the way for the buyer's side to negotiate any amount of concession that might be necessary as it relates to compensation. I think it was just a perfect phase in.
I agree. And again, I don't think that the cab was imposed any sort of risk of liability. I know I've heard those arguments. I personally didn't see it, but I think it was helpful for the transition. I just don't know that we need it anymore. And again, these aren't staff decisions. You have to understand when a decision like this is made, it's made by our risk management committee, which consists of members, all over the state of Arizona, from big brokerages, small brokers, agents, brokers, throughout all sorts of different practices of real estate. Then it goes to the executive committee. So it's members, it's practitioners that are making these decisions.
All right. So as far as now revisions to existing forms, so we talked about the cab form going away. I don't know whether we have any brand new forms that we've never seen before, but a couple times a year we take a look at these forms, and I know that there was the seller commission addendum. It was so new, and I'm sure you guys got a lot of feedback. And so what forms and what are some of the bigger changes that we're seeing now?
So again, getting rid of the cab was the primary change that took effect on February 1st. But whenever you change one form, it has a ripple effect and it impacts other forms. And in this case, it impacted our 4 listing contracts that AAR drafts and provides to the multiple listing services. They're not obligated to use those EA, but if they so choose, they're available to them. But we had to make changes to the listing contracts, right? Because we don't need sellers authorizing their agents to enter into a cab because the cab doesn't exist. And then we took the dollar figures out because the dollar figures aren't being predetermined. They're being negotiated pursuant to the buyer's offer. So those were 2 important changes that were made to the listing contracts as a result of changes to the compensation agreement between brokers. And then the other change that you'll see effective on February 1st is changes to our 2 buyer representation agreements. And these were pretty small changes in that only 8 words were added. But, and we've talked about this before, I think agents have done a fantastic job transitioning to the changes that have resulted from the settlement agreement. And it turned out to be a lot easier than I think maybe any of us thought it would be at the time. But if there was one thing that I think some agents are still struggling with, it's making clear on the buyer representation agreements that when you put in that percentage or that dollar, it has to be a fixed amount or rate. It has to be a some certain. It can't be a, hey, well, that whatever, I'm just going to write in here a number. But
To be determined.
Right, to be determined, or to be paid by seller, or the amount that I'll receive in cooperative compensation. I mean, as you sit there, you don't know that the seller is going to offer anything, so you can't put that. And so just a very small clarification to line 19, making it clear that the amount that's written in has to be a fixed amount or rate. And hopefully that'll help solve that problem that we're still seeing occasionally.
So one of the ones that I think our brokers deal with all the time is, you now under contract probably have a more responsible perspective on making sure the consumer understands that you're going to be showing them for sale by owners, or you're going to be showing them new home construction properties. And I think the big deal, Mike, is in Scott, are the new home construction properties, because right now the builders are incentivizing, which is typical, some of the move-in ready product. And when they do that, they throw dollars at real estate agents. And we all know, they probably should be throwing those dollars at the buyer maybe, but they're throwing them at the real estate agent. So, real estate agents have a tendency to want to use that compensation addendum to increase it based on that. Sure. But let me digress just for a moment. Back to this document real quick.
And you got to be careful.
Yeah.
Real quick, I would caution you against increasing the compensation, and I'm sure you guys have had those conversations.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
No, we don't like that. In fact, we don't like it because of that form, because of it. But so on this document, has the legal team, the risk management team at AAR taken into consideration language that may allow an agent to bifurcate compensation to potentially a residential resale property versus a new home construction property, where I might, instead of putting one number that tries to meet everything, I say, as maybe a line number, if it's a residential resale home, I agree to compensate for this, and if it's a new home construction property where buyer and seller agree that they may be offering the agent a bonus, it would be this, and a fixed amount still, an actual amount. Have they had any of those conversations, and what was the opinion?
Right. They have, and they're continuing to have those discussions. I think part of the concern is, if you're going to be charging different amounts, you need to be able to identify additional services that you're performing that then entitles you to the additional compensation. And I think there's concern as to whether every agent is going to be able to do that. Because again, if you're going to be earning more, or it's a different amount, you better be able to show that you're doing something differently. And I don't know that we want to put all agents in that position, because I'm not sure that they're all going to be able to do just that.
Well, you and I have, let's just say, did not have any conversation about these topics today at all.
Correct.
I just said hello just when you. Yeah,
that's right.
So, and it is the opinion of West USA that to exactly what you've said, which is we don't like using the form, and we're not sure under what conditions it even makes sense to use the form because of the responsibility of the agent to have to justify that. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, probably a better topic for me off camera. I got a lot of thoughts and a lot of things I do, and maybe I should have run those by you at breakfast this morning. Yeah. So the other thing we were talking about this morning, and I thought was fascinating, I think it's important for agents to understand is we're hearing about these changes. We're getting rid of the cab form. We're changing language in this. We're changing language in this. And I think a lot of agents go, well, how come I don't have a say in this? And really, in truth, we do have a say. Like, what is that process? Because for us, when we are making changes, and who's making those changes? Because I think we know you're an attorney, so we think there's just all these attorneys are sitting around trying to mess with us.
Right. And while that is true, there's an entire system, and most of the changes that get made are at the request of members. They come from brokers, they come from members, they come from individuals that are using these forms that have said, hey, I think if you did this, it would make the form better, or have you considered this? They submit a request. It goes to the risk management committee. The risk management committee evaluates it and says, you know what?
And who's on the risk management committee?
It is, again, representatives from all over the state. It is a diverse cross-section of our membership.
So agents.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Agents. Yep.
That's a point I want to get across.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. It is agents, it's members, it's people that are utilizing the forms. And they make a decision and say, yeah, you know what, that could be advantageous. Let's create a forms work group to sit down and evaluate that, to potentially draft that new form or to draft whatever that change is. And they sit and they do that. And a critical step in that process is once they have that rough draft done, they send it out to what we refer to as the loop. And it's about 3,000 additional agents who have agreed to volunteer their time to review draft forms and provide us with feedback. And we also put them on the internet. I mean, anybody and everybody that wants to provide feedback on that draft is welcome. The work group reconvenes and they sit and they look at each and every comment that comes in, and inevitably they make changes that improve that form, that draft, based on the feedback that's received. They finalize the form, it goes to the risk management committee, then it goes to the executive committee. So there's thousands and thousands of people that are sitting, participating in that process, that are laying eyes on these documents before they go live. It is not, one attorney sitting, in an ivory tower telling practitioners, here's what's best for you. That's not the way the process works.
But attorneys are consulted as part of that process throughout that process.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, I just want to make, we've heard members are a part of it, members are a part of it. But I want to make sure that they understand that so are the attorneys.
Yep. Look, I'm an attorney and I look at the forms. Aaron Green, who's our general counsel, participates in that process. Our legal hotline attorney, Rick Mack, participates in that process. He actually serves as a member of the risk management committee. And then there's plenty of other real estate attorneys that are on the loop that provide feedback. So we get as much input as possible. This can't just be one or two people making decisions that impact an entire
That's what I think
industry.
people think. So don't mean to put you on the spot, but what's your favorite attorney joke? Okay, we'll move on. Unless you got one.
I guess I've never heard of one. Is there? That's a thing? That's a thing? Wow. Yeah.
All right, I want to get into choice and kind of an West USA obviously has put together West USA Choice. I think West USA's really done a phenomenal job at educating our agent family what the difference is between West USA Realty and West USA Choice. But I still think there might be some confusion out there. Like, what did the Phoenix Association of Realtors do? Because I know you were sharing some stories at breakfast today of people just they made the decision and had nothing to do with you, and then they want you to return their money.
And that's what we want people to understand is if they choose to participate in MLS Choice, that they understand that they are no longer a realtor, right? And some of them, they understand they're not a member of the National Association of Realtors, but they also then have to understand that means they're not a member of the Arizona Association of Realtors, and they're not a member of the local association, meaning, again, they're not a member of even the Phoenix Association of Realtors. And so, our poor membership department gets, a couple calls a week from people. They're upset that they can't access Transaction Desk, and they can't get to the forms. And then we ask them, well, you're not a realtor. Yes, I am a realtor. I signed up.
It's on my business card.
I signed up through the Phoenix Association. Well, did you sign up for MLS Choice? Yeah, I signed up for Okay, well then you're actually not a realtor. But they didn't understand that. And then once you explain that to them, then they say, all right, Scott, give us our money back. And I'm like, well, I don't have your money, But I want people to understand that it's a choice, and they have that option. They have the ability to make that decision, but they are, for whatever it is, $200 or so, giving up a lot of the benefits and services that are associated with being a realtor, that they're not able to use the forms, that they're going to have to use different forms, and they're going to have to learn those different forms, right? That they're going to have to change all their advertising, their signage. They're not going to be able to identify themselves as a realtor or utilize their realtor designations, any of those things. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just going to say, because, value proposition is always a big thing. For $200, I mean, you couldn't go to prepaid legal and for $200 have them draft a contract, first of all, and that's a whole year's fee, not just just a document fee. But I don't want to. So let me ask this: Is the fact that the Arizona Association of Realtors focus on homeownership and private property rights as an advocacy for homeowners, not for realtors per se, but for homeowners, is that an important issue? And because nobody seems to want to have that conversation or bring it up.
Look, we're the largest political action committee in the state of Arizona. And yes, we are focused on helping our members, right? Making sure that they're able to represent their clients and they're able to do it with as least amount of risk as possible, and also, where they can be profitable in their business model. But we also look out for the rights of private property owners, and there's nobody else that's doing that. That's really just the realtor associations that take the time to make sure that they're protected as well. A simple example, right? There's construction defect legislation that would really gut a lot of the construction defect protections that homeowners have. The only people that are objecting to that legislation, the only people that are out there looking to make sure that, hey, we got to make sure this is fair for the homeowner. Some of these defects may not come to light in a year or two. You can't just eliminate that, reduce that statute of limitations. That's the realtors. But again, it also is beneficial to the members, right? I mean, you like using a for sale sign? Well, you wouldn't be able to do that, but not for legislation, that the Arizona Association of Realtors ran. And then when it was, challenged judicially, who helped ensure that those homeowners that were part of that litigation were successful? Again, that was the realtors. So it's looking out for both private property rights, homeowners, and our members.
See, I think that, and that was kind of what I was trying to get to when we opened up. So, Todd, I appreciate you bringing that up. Because I think we just, as agents, we think that AAR is just a agent service,
Policing crew.
and just to help us, rather than it's just somebody has got to. And I'll just be frank. I mean, a lot of agents don't right now have a lot of faith in anything because, we weren't able to stand up to the DOJ, as far as on the overall National Association of Realtors. Whether that's a true statement or not, that's the perception that agents have, and perception is reality. And so I think it's important not to lump everybody into one caveat or one area here. That there is a difference between the two, and we do have. I mean, we have challenges in this state as far as the government trying to jeopardize homeowners' rights. And I think agents just think that you're just an agent service. Yeah, you provide forms, but don't realize that you guys are you guys are, our representatives in the government. And when I say our representatives, yes, us as well, but our buyers and our sellers.
Right. I mean, when there's legislation to outlaw all, short-term rentals within a certain city or municipality, well, hold on a second. We have private property rights. These individuals that have these properties, they should have the right to do with it what they want, as long as they don't create a nuisance or, are harmful in any way. But the people that are looking out for those homeowners to ensure that they're able to use their property as they wish, it's the realtors. And it's also, and from our standpoint, it's not just bringing legislation. A lot of times it's also defeating harmful legislation. Last session there was one that would have made real estate licensees liable for deed fraud. If licensees would have had the obligation of ensuring identification of parties. I mean, you're not bouncers, right? I mean, you're not checking IDs and know how to spot fake IDs. I mean, there was legislation that would have required you to provide a DNA sample at the time you get your license. That's defeated. Most people don't know about it because we're able to take care of it. But that legislation takes effect, and then all of a sudden there's a lot of upset people.
Well, Nick's a former bouncer at Chuck E. Cheese.
Yes.
So
I've heard.
afterwards
I've heard.
We can get into
We'll
that.
talk.
All right.
Do you still have the costume?
I'd like to see
Wow.
that.
All right, Scott, you're uninvited,
All
buddy.
right, last 2 minutes. Give you the floor. Like, what's AAR's focus on, and kind of where do we think the market's going in 2025? What are you guys focused on that we should know about?
Yeah, I mean, again, our focus continues to be on providing benefits and services that make your job easier. And I'll give you a new benefit, for example, that we're looking at right now. It's something that's called an MLS single point of entry. Right now, a lot of agents belong to multiple MLSs right across the state. Yeah. And that means you've got to enter that listing 2, 3, 4 times. we're working on a system in conjunction with all of the MLSs in the state it would be a portal that would allow you to enter that listing one time. Then you get to choose which of the MLSs you belong to you want it to populate on. That's a time saver, right?
That's a huge time saver.
And that's a pain point that was relayed to us. And so we look at it and go, okay, well, let's see what we can do to help our members solve this problem. And it's a lot of work, this solution, and it certainly is taking quite a bit of time and effort, but we're working on it. And I'd love to be able to solve that problem for our members.
All right, Scott, appreciate it as always. Really good information. We leave you with the quote of the day. If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And I don't need to sit. I can eat and stand at the same time.
Look at you, buddy.
Just be in the room, right?
Just be around the table. All right, appreciate everybody joining us today. Go out and sell a home.